Welcome to the Neophyte in the Woods podcast with Andrew McDowell.
Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Neophyte in the Woods podcast. I'm your host, Andrew McDowell, and we are proud members of the Change Your POV podcast network. We're catching up tonight with an old friend, Jason from Conserve the Wild. I'm excited to talk to him. We've got some good stuff tonight. So without further ado, Jason, how have you been?
I'm doing all right.
Good.
How did fishing go earlier today?
I got about 45 minutes in, and then it started to pour, and I didn't have a raincoat, so I said, F it, and headed home.
Yeah, it rained pretty much all day here, so.
Yeah, it's just not been particularly great weather.
No, it is not.
But, at the end of the day, it's there's no hurricanes and there's no snowstorms, and we're hardy folk, and we've learned to adapt.
Yeah, I mean, it could always be worse, right?
Exactly. I mean, we could be back up here in March. We had it was like hurricanes or nor'easters every week.
Yeah, you guys definitely got the shaft this winter, that's for sure.
Yeah, we got our butts kicked.
Yes, you did.
But, hearing some buddies talk, the turkey populations are all still good. The deer populations are pretty good. It works out okay.
That's good. That's better than the alternative.
Yeah, I have a buddy who has property up in Maine, went through, and he said he's seen more turkeys this year than he ever had before. So he was a happy camper.
Yeah, that's good. That's always good news whenever you're talking like that.
Yep, and I mean, he's not like a hardcore turkey hunter, so the fact that he could go out and kill something pretty quick, and I'm not gonna say easy, but relatively speaking, is great for him. So how was your season?
It was difficult.
Yeah.
But honestly, we had more turkeys and I think more toms than we've at least visible than we've had in years. Which was nice to see.
Yep.
Obviously, but for some reason this year, they would not come onto our property, and at least for us, whenever they don't come onto our property, it makes it very tough because we can only move so far, and then there's property line, and you can't do anything about that.
Yep.
So. I actually took the problem for us is they actually roosted on our property, but we're sort of like at the top of a ridge. So As soon as they would fly down, it was straight downhill and off our property. So, I heard a lot off the roost.
Yep.
But that was about it. So. I actually took a weekend.
Yep.
And went on state game lands, just
Okay.
so I'd be able to move around. And I had literally zero luck.
Oh,
I did not hear a single thing. I walked a total of 7 miles,
wow.
and there was not a bird to be heard anywhere. So that was unfortunate and disappointing.
Yes.
However, I will say that that same day, um, my dad came up, and we did a little bit of habitat work,
Yep.
and then we went to dinner. And when we got back, I had about an hour and a half. So I was like, well, no use just sitting here doing nothing. I might as well go sit in the woods and do nothing. So, because in Pennsylvania, the first 3 Saturdays you can only hunt until noon, and then that following Monday you're allowed to hunt all day.
Okay.
So I figured, hey, I'll go out. I'll see if I can catch them coming back to a couple trees that I know they roost. They didn't. So as I was walking out, still light, still shooting light, I knew that they'd be starting to fly up soon. And it turned out that I was right, because when I walked out, I watched 2 gobblers fly up into the roost. So I was about 100 yards away from the tree that they wanted to roost. So, and that the way that our property lays out, that 100 yards that I was away might as well have been 100 miles, because I would have never seen them if I didn't get up and start walking. So
That's a shame. And
it is.
I know some guys who, in cases like that, will try to take him like a pheasant. Did that cross your mind, or
that did cross my mind?
if you're just a little bit closer?
Well, yeah. I actually turned the corner on one of our tram roads when the first one started flying up. It hit the tree, and as soon as it hit the tree, it kept going, and I knew it was too far. The second one, I saw it before it started to fly up, but it was about 40 yards away, which normally I would take that shot, but it was through nothing but brush.
Yeah.
So I was like, well, I froze. What am I going to do?
Yep.
And as I froze, it started to fly up. I started to pull up on it, but by the time I was anywhere, by the time it hit that tree and then started flying again, it was, 60, 70 yards, and it's a turkey load, and that's a big bird and a small area to kill it in the head. So I was like, you know what? We're just going to let that one fly on by.
Yep. And your season's is over and done with?
Yeah, it ended. The last day was Memorial Day.
Okay. Yeah.
So we're done now. We have the only active hunting you can do now is groundhogs or coyotes.
Okay.
So
you guys have a year-round season for coyote?
Yeah, it is 24/7, 365 days a year.
Wow.
I have never actively hunted coyotes.
Yep.
It's something that I want to do. I just find myself not making the time for it.
Yeah.
I was able to shoot one coyote probably about 15 years ago now. It was on the first day of our deer rifle season.
Mm-hmm.
I saw one. I was able to pull the trigger and get it. But I would like to try this year, but obviously, if there's only so much time that I can be away from the family and hunt, and I'm gonna default to deer and, in this case this year, elk, over way before I decide to hunt coyotes. So
absolutely,
maybe, but no promises on that one.
Yeah, we have the coyote season is long, but not as long as it is for you guys. For us up here in Massachusetts, we have it opens, I don't know, early deer season, and then goes through the end of March.
Okay.
And you can hunt them with a rifle during the day between sunrise and sunset, and then after sunset, it's shotgun with shot no larger than FF.
Okay.
So there's no, you can't, or a 22.
Okay.
So you can't take your AR out in the woods and use it for the game that it's meant to be used on or anything like that.
Right. Of course.
Which is a little frustrating, but I think it's it's a regulation that started out and it made sense, but I just don't think it's the right call. But we're picking our battles a little bit more carefully these days.
Yeah, it's actually Pennsylvania just passed a law that you're allowed to use. Well, they passed a law saying that the Game Commission would be allowed to approve semi-automatic rifles at their own discretion. At this point now, that means that we can use them for small game and coyote, but not deer yet, which I don't have any skin. I don't personally have any skin in the game, so I don't really care one way or the other. I hunt on private property surrounded by other private properties, and none of those people have any kind of AR style rifles.
Sure.
So, and we know them. They're, for the most part, decently responsible. So I have no concern, but I know that in Pennsylvania there's a large contingent of people that have concern that there's going to be people just, spraying and praying as just, shooting at everything that moves. So it's I have a feeling that's going to be a long haul for anyone who wants that to be passed.
Yeah. And in all candor, I'm one of those people who don't have a problem with using an AR to shoot a deer. The first deer that I ever took part in the hunt on, and that we killed way back in, when we first start talking 3-4 years ago.
Yeah, probably.
Shot him through the heart and lungs with an AR. I mean, it absolutely shredded it. The deer went less than 100 yards, and what judicial marksmanship is going to be in your favor there, but if that's what people want to do and they can do it ethically, I don't see any reason to stop them.
No, as long as, you're either a good hunter or you're not. You're either an ethical hunter or you're not.
Yep.
The weapon that you choose does not matter to me. You're going to be ethical if you're an ethical hunter, you're going to be ethical with a bow or a crossbow or a rifle or an AR style or a pistol, whatever. As long as you're doing it by the law, it doesn't matter to me.
I agree, 100%.
I don't foresee myself, if they pass it, going out and buying an AR style rifle. But that's just because when I buy things, I like them to be very, very nice, and that's going to be a pretty chunk of change, pretty good chunk of change if I decide to go that route. And I don't have that kind of money right now, so. It's not if they pass it. If they don't, it doesn't affect me one way or the other.
Yep. Yeah. No, it's all a point well taken. Although I am somewhat perversely tempted in a few years when I go on my elk hunt to put a 6.5 Creedmoor upper on an AR and take it with me, just for pure contrarian sake, because everybody out there, you can't use an AR to hunt. Well, yeah.
Yeah, well, you can.
You can. I've seen it done, but it's just one of those. I like to do things that people tell me I can't. I like to catch striped bass on ultralight spinning tackle, which is something that people tell me that I can't do.
Yeah, there's been quite a few of those things where people say, you can't do that, and then you do it. And, well, you shouldn't have been able to.
Yeah,
it still happened. I don't know what to tell you.
Exactly. You know what? I feel that same way about getting my wife to marry me, right?
Yeah, that was a miracle if I've ever heard one of mine. I'll tell you that.
It's getting married life treating you well.
Yeah, it's been great. That was one of those lock it up before she realizes the mistake she's making.
Exactly.
So.
Exactly. Once you get that ring on the finger, it's substantially harder for them to run away.
Yes. Yeah.
And then once you have a kid with them, it's even harder.
Yeah, well, we're gonna let that go for a while because that would cut into a good bit of the hunting plans that I have over the next couple years. So I'm in no rush, and luckily for me, she is in no ruch either. So
it works out perfectly well.
Yeah, it works out really well.
Just remember, Valentine's Day is not your friend. It's 9 months from deer season.
Valentine's Day she doesn't celebrate.
Perfect.
One of the great things I loved about her. It's more of the do little things throughout the year.
Yep.
That I
absolutely
not that I don't want to do, but I wouldn't choose to do.
Yep.
to try to get those brownie points.
Yeah. Yep. I bought my wife tickets to go see Mamma Mia,
There you go.
and that was fortunately there was a friend of hers that wanted to go, so I didn't have to go.
Even better.
Yep. Yeah, it was just a win all around. It was a
Yes.
win all around. Speaking of winning all around, we're going to talk about some good stuff tonight.
All right.
Specifically, I think to start off, we want to talk about quality deer management and what it means and some of the ins and outs of it. And I know you've been studying furiously.
I have.
Are you squared away to be
Well,
the deer steward
be-
that I know you are?
Well, I'll be honest. I'm just trying not to make a fool of myself. Is really all it's coming down to. Trying not to have any misspoken words, or at least not too many. I'll say that.
Well, I know almost nothing about it, so anything you can bring to it will be, I'm sure, a huge step in the right direction for me and for the listeners.
Well, I'll do what I can. I can promise you that.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. So, I think, I want to start with basics, right? This is a show about learning new things and being being introduced to new topics and exploring and changing your perspective. And I think that probably the best place to start for this conversation is just most basic principles. What is quality deer management and what isn't it?
So there's a lot of misconceptions out there. Really, until you start actually looking into it and seeing what all is involved, everyone has their ideas of whether it's good or bad. So if you listen to people, you're only getting part of the story. So quality deer management, basically, it was an adaptation of a management plan for deer taken from Australia, of all places.
Huh.
So this guy, Joe Hamilton, in 1988 founded the QDMA, the Quality Deer Management Association. He did that in South Carolina. They're currently their headquarters is currently in Athens, Georgia. Basically, what they are doing is they're trying to promote eight things that all revolve around white-tailed deer. The whole thing is solely about white-tailed deer. First and foremost, it's safe and ethical hunting. Then it's also adherence to wildlife and trespass laws. Then here's where some of the controversy starts coming in. The appropriate harvest of adult does where needed. They also want to educate hunters and non-hunters toward a better understanding of wildlife management, and that wildlife management is supposed to be based in science. They want hunter involvement in education and management, so trying to get more people involved in more of a year-round approach as opposed to just a couple days a year going out and hunting. They also support, based on that science, they're supporting wildlife cooperation with wildlife biologists and enforcement officers. They want us to practice restraint in harvesting young bucks, and I'm sure we'll talk about that later as well. And the last one is just stewardship and appreciation of all wildlife. So yes, they focus everything they do on white-tailed deer, but when you look at their website, you look at their articles in their magazine that they put out, if you're a member, and they will tell you do this because it helps deer, but hey, it also helps these songbirds and these turkey and different upland birds and bears and things like that.
So it's a holistic approach to land and wildlife management as opposed to just focused on a single species, right? I mean, you're benefiting a species, but also you're benefiting everything around it.
Yeah, I mean, now, white-tailed deer, I mean, that is by far the most popular hunted game in North America because it's so plentiful. And that's because of the white-tailed deer itself is highly adaptable to a lot of different situations, which is why you can have white-tailed deer living in suburbia and eating your flowers.
Yep.
But their goal is, yes, everything we're doing with an eye towards white-tailed deer, helping them basically be as healthy as possible as a herd. And then they say, hey, that you're doing this, but there's also other benefits as well to other wildlife that you may want to see.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's an interesting perspective, because I think that a lot of people look at QDM as maximizing antler size at the exclusion of everything else. You know, those guys who are out chasing, a Boone and Crockett buck, they're it's the perception is that it's there to do that, not help an entire ecosystem and non-game species.
Right. Yeah, and to be in full disclosure, all honesty, that's why I started looking into it.
Mm-hmm.
I was, we have family property. Hey, I can make property. Let's try to make the bucks as big as we can. As I learned more about it, as I've went through some courses that they have, as I've started practicing things, I'm doing habitat management, and I find myself getting more pride in
Mm-hmm.
watching does and fawns benefit from what habitat management I've done than actually seeing this huge buck. Now, don't get me wrong.
Yep.
I love seeing huge bucks. I mean, that there's nothing like it. Actually, my little cousin just shot her first buck this past year.
That's
and
awesome.
It was the biggest buck we ever shot on our property. So do I think it's working? Yes,
Mm-hmm.
in that aspect, but it's also working because we're seeing very healthy deer.
And and this goes back to, I think, the first conversation we had on this show, is that it's a gradual process, and you're not looking for results overnight, but it's also what you just mentioned. You're passing it on to the next generation and the generation after that. And it seems to me that if you're practicing this type of ecological stewardship, that's exactly what the end result is desired to be.
Yeah, I mean, the better the habitat is, the healthier the deer are going to be.
Mm-hmm.
The better an area is managed for, overall herd health, then, by definition, just the bucks are going to get bigger. Now, there is a cap. Our property is located in northwestern Pennsylvania.
Mm-hmm.
They're only going to get so big. We're
Yep.
probably never going to see the kind of bucks that you're seeing on the Druries in Iowa. In fact, I know that's not going to happen. We have 70 acres. We can only manage so much,
Mm-hmm.
because we can't manage the neighbors.
Sure.
100%. But there is something that we can talk about that. But just trying to have healthy deer in Pennsylvania, that's been a very controversial
Mm-hmm.
topic for about 20 years now. In the early 2000s, a guy by the name of Gary Alt became our game commission head honcho, and his whole deal was there are too many deer in Pennsylvania. So he basically opened up the floodgates
Mm-hmm.
for doe harvest. That's really the only way to get deer numbers
Yep.
down is to shoot does, to
Yep.
harvest a doe. So a lot of people really like that idea because they could shoot a lot of deer. A lot of people soon also realized that the numbers, anytime you do anything, it always swings a little too far.
Mm-hmm.
So deer numbers were down very, very low in I'd say right around 2008, 2009 time frame. Now, since then, at least where we're at, it's definitely come back. We're actually around our properties at the time where we're thinking we need to start taking more
Mm-hmm.
does. We probably went 6 or 7 years without shooting a single doe on our property, buying the tags so they couldn't be sold to someone else, but not using them. Now we're in the process of, hey, we need to start shooting some doe because we don't have the food to be able to feed all these deer in our area. So that's the big thing with QDM is you're taking, the state, they can only do so much of
Mm-hmm.
management because they're managing for the entire state, and then also for, the our wildlife management units, which cover a couple counties. But just because, what will work in one place 100 miles away,
Mm-hmm.
where we're at, it may not be right because the dynamics are going to be different. You have different herd numbers, different landscape, things like that. So it's sort of taking some of that onus on yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, you're seeing that you have a lot of deer in this area. Start taking a couple deer, a couple does out so that you can try to balance that herd a little bit better. So it's sort of putting the onus on the hunters, not just, well, the state told me I could do it, so I'm going to do it type thing.
And so, and that's actually, one of the questions that I know I've wondered about. I don't own my own land. I share it with let's say 30 people who are maybe going to go out once. And then there's me who goes out every day for opener and then every Saturday thereafter. I want there to be more deer there. I want there to be more nice deer there, healthy deer there. And there are. But I don't think we're at the carrying capacity based on the size of the property and, everything that's around it, right? I mean, it's a little pocket woods that's 160 something acres and it's in a neighborhood, right? So there's lots of food, lots of room.
Right.
Is it possible for me to practice QDM on my own, or does it really take buy-in where, I don't own the land and everybody around me might not be to walk in the same walk or think in the same way?
So in order for QDM to work anywhere, you're going to need, for it to be truly successful, you're going to need a group of people covering a pretty large area. But I will also say that how QDM started and how it gets started in any new area where there's not currently a chapter or what they call a cooperative, where you have multiple landowners working together. It all starts with one person saying, I want to do this, I want to practice this, and trying to convince others. That's basically me in my hunting area. I'm the advocate. On my property, we have 5 hunters that hunt on our property, which is very tight. Five hunters on 70 acres is very, very tight.
Sure.
But not everyone hunts, all seasons. I have convinced 2 other ones of it. And it's hard, it's hard to convince everyone to go with any single thing. I mean,
yes.
That's the way our country works, You can personally do QDM if you don't own land, if you're by yourself. Yeah, you can do it. And there's the way that it works and how you can get other people involved is we take QDM in the way of sort of like levels. We're not saying this is a hard rule, you have to take only this size buck and that's it. It's based on your level. So personally, my level right now is I only shoot a buck if I aged it in my mind to be 3.5 years old or older. So it has nothing to do with antler size. In our area, you can shoot, in order to shoot a buck, it has to have 3 points on one side. So if I saw a half rack 3-point and I'm aging it to 4.5 or 5.5 years old, I'm going to shoot that buck.
Sure.
Now, that level part, I know people, and I've listened to other podcasts, and you read about other people. They're trying to not shoot bucks until they're 5, 6, 7, 8 years old.
Like Dan Johnson won't shoot anything under a 4.5-year-old.
Right. Mark Kenyon, he has his, he's going for one buck that I think at this point now is 6.5 years. Is going to be 6 years old. I'm not at that point yet. I hope to get there someday. I don't know that I ever will in our area because we have a lot of bucks that get shot whenever they're. I mean, if it's a 3.5-year-old buck, it's going to probably be the biggest buck you've ever seen in that area, or very close to. So, but there are different levels. So that's sort of the key when you're trying to convince other people is that we're not managing for big bucks. We're just trying to manage for herd health. So, even if this year, as I'm looking at trail cam pictures, as I'm doing my scouting, if I notice, which I don't foresee to be an issue, but if I notice that, hey, we don't have any bucks around that are 3.5 or older, I will shoot a doe because I use the meat. I would like to have the meat. And actually my plan this year, because we do need to take some of the doe numbers down, is the very first doe I see walk by, I'm going to shoot. That's not a yearling. So, I mean, you can still be a successful hunter even if, you don't have anything that year. If I go back on my sort of mental goal of, I'm only going to shoot 3.5-year-olds and I shoot a 2.5-year-old this year, that's one less buck that I could hunt next year.
Next year, sure. And so, just out of curiosity, like why 3.5-year-old?
3.5 is sort of like an adult mature deer. That's sort of the point where they're no longer like a teenager.
Okay.
So basically, when you have like a 1.5 to 2.5-year-old deer, that's sort of like a teenager. Part of it for me is giving that deer a long enough life that, in my mind, I can justify taking its life, that it's lived, it's bred, it's passed on, hopefully some of its genetic makeup for the next generation.
Okay. And I mean, I think about it like Jake turkeys, right? I mean, Jake turkeys are wily, but they're pretty dumb. Like,
yes,
I imagine a 1.5-year-old deer is almost the same kind of thing, right? He hasn't been through a hard season yet where everybody's trying to kill him, so he's less likely to make a rookie mistake, so to speak, at 3.5 versus 1.5.
And even for us 2.5-year-olds, I mean, we have in Pennsylvania antler restrictions, so even most 2.5-year-old bucks are then for the first time legal where we hunt, so they really haven't been hunted. I mean, they might have seen a hunter the year before, but that hunter had no desire to shoot it because it wasn't legally allowed, so they just see someone in a tree and, oh, that was weird, but no danger came my way, so I'm not worried about it. 3.5 is when you're starting to get into deer that are a little tougher to hunt. Obviously, as they get older, they get smarter, they get tougher to hunt. So it does make for a more challenging hunt. Just this past year, I did not harvest a buck. I did not get a shot at a 3.5-year-old buck that I felt comfortable with, or older buck. The very first afternoon, I could have tagged out on 2 different 2.5-year-old bucks. They hung out below me for an hour.
Wow.
I chose not to. I watched them feed in the food plot that I had planted, and I felt good about it, that I helped them. Unfortunately, one of those bucks was shot in rifle season, but that's the risk that you sort of run.
Yep. And that's actually, one of the things that I think about so in Massachusetts we can't bait, but technically if you plant a field you're within the law, right? If you plant a food plot. I never have, just because of where I hunt, right? I mean, I'm not going to plant a food plot and let somebody else hunt over it, because presumably there's not an insubstantial cost associated with cultivating that field, right? So one of the perceptions out there is that quality deer management costs a lot of money because it's about planting crops and doing that kind of stuff. Is that an accurate assessment, a partially accurate assessment, somewhere in the middle?
It's all a matter of scale.
Yeah.
It's all to basically what point you want to take it. If you are full 100% into QDM and you have the money to spend, and you're spending, tens of thousands of dollars or hundreds of thousands of dollars on property and equipment, and absolutely, you can go ahead and do that. I probably spend more money than my wife would like on what I do. But I enjoy it. That's why I do it. I enjoy sort of the habitat management. It's not just food plots. I mean, you can actually employ QDM practices with zero money spent. I mean, you can just go for the aspect of, I'm going to not harvest young bucks. I'm going to harvest an adequate amount of does, and that doesn't cost you any money. You can spend just a little bit of money and still manipulate the habitat by cutting down undesirable trees, even just cutting down a good oak tree, but allowing sunlight to hit the forest floor, and now all of a sudden you have that regeneration of the forest, and that's what the deer like to eat. They can't eat 40 feet up in a tree. So it could be just as simple as just buying a chainsaw and some safety equipment, and you're doing habitat management. It could, to do full effective QDM, you pretty much need some habitat management, which typically requires you to own land, although sometimes when you lease, the person who owns the land might let you plant a food plot or do something like that. So, I mean, you can go as crazy as you want, but you don't have to spend any money to practice the most basic principle of QDM, which is just herd management through pulling the trigger.
Mm-hmm. And you know, I think that actually, you know, and this backtracks a little bit. I think that some folks have no problem shooting a buck for whatever reason, right? I mean, you know, Bambi's father being chased through the forest by a hunter, whatever. But that, you know, Bambi's mom getting shot is like a major traumatic moment for a lot of people who grew up watching Disney, and a lot of people that I know have a mental block about shooting a doe, which
Yeah,
is
I think
crazy.
that's a little. Yeah, I personally I have no issues with shooting a doe,
Nope.
but part of that's because of one, the meat tastes the same. Actually, typically, personally, I think that doe meat tastes better
Yes.
than a buck. But I also have shot the last 3 bucks during the rut when their testosterone's going crazy,
Yeah.
and
They're
that
all horned up.
does, yeah, it alters the flavor. So I have no problems with that. But I think there's two basic reasons why people don't like shooting does, and both of them well, the one I guess I sort of understand. I think it's a little bit of a maternal
Mm-hmm.
aspect. You could people in their subconsciously in their mind almost think like I'm shooting my mom type thing, and that has a little of the gets the emotions going a little bit. Um, the other part which I 100% disagree with, and this is a battle that I have with some of the older hunters in my family. They think if you shoot a doe, then that's 1 or 2 deer that you don't have next year, and then
Mm-hmm.
they each have 1 or 2 deer, and then they each have 1 or 2 deer, fawns, and then that's your whole population is going to crash because you shot one doe. What research has actually shown is that when um, a doe has a buck fawn, typically that buck fawn will disperse a minimum of 1 mile away. And if that buck fawn disperses at least 1 mile and up to 15 or 20 miles, I'm not going to get to hunt that buck anyways
Mm-hmm.
because it's not on my property. So the idea of not shooting doe to protect future bucks, that it turns out it does not work. Even some does disperse. It all depends on the hierarchy of the doe groups that are utilizing that property.
Wow. Yeah. That I mean, and I think that that's one of the things that people, like you said, people don't realize is that the knock-on effects of shooting a doe are substantially lower than they would be based on your perception of what it means to take a female out of the breeding population.
Yeah, and just ask Ann Arbor and Mount Pleasant here in Pennsylvania, anywhere that has a controlled sharpshooting style company come in
Mm-hmm.
and shoot deer to get them out of an area. When that happens, you may be good for a year, maybe up to two, and then all of a sudden the deer come back. It's not they're coming back; they're coming from outside areas. They're getting displaced from where they were born and coming into this area. It's like a vacuum, right?
Yeah.
So, if you have, a container full of golf balls and you start taking some golf balls out of the bottom, other golf balls are going to start replacing them.
Yep.
The same thing happens with deer.
Digging a hole in sand. I mean, it's the
Yep,
same thing.
100%.
Wow. Yeah, and excuse me. It's allergy season up here.
Allergy season everywhere this
Yeah.
time of year.
It's awful. I was hoping that the rain would knock it all down and I'd be able to breathe again, but Claritin has been consumed by me more frequently than actual meals lately, which is one reason I look forward to the fall.
Yes, me too.
It's the worst. Um, so it actually brings us to, I think, one of the things I'm curious about in your practice, right? So you have this property, you have 70 acres. I know you do some crop planting. Like, how do you decide what approach to take with the property that you have under QDM?
So for us, it is trial and error
Mm-hmm.
to this point, basically. Um, the first thing that I've done is look from sort of an aerial view within about a mile radius around our property, see what else is out there. Are there other crop fields?
Mm-hmm.
What kind of food do deer have to eat around your property? The idea is to, if you're going to plant something that they don't have available to them outside of your property. For us, for the most part, it's mainly forest, even some state game lands. There's a couple small fields that do plant a little bit of corn or soybeans depending on the year, but for the most part, it's forest. So basically, we can plant whatever we want.
Mm-hmm.
What we have found that works the best for us is for the roads that we have for our side-by-side access. We've planted chicory and clover that provides food throughout the spring and the summer, which we find important because you're giving nourishment to does that are lactating. So then that makes healthier fawns. And also that's when the bucks are growing their antlers. So we want to make sure we maximize that growth if we can, help maximize as much as we can. And then for our food plots, for the most part, we plant a brassica mix. So that's some clover and turnips and sugar beets and radishes. And the reason why we like that is because we have 2 archery hunters, myself included, and then we have, if archery season doesn't go well, we have 5 rifle hunters. And so basically that kind of mix provides us with food for the deer all the way from the beginning of archery season through the end of our muzzleloader season, our flintlock season, because they'll eat the tops, and then once we have a good hard frost, they'll start actually digging up the beets and the turnips and the radishes and start eating those as well.
And those are high carbohydrates, so presumably once the temperature drops, it helps them.
It turns the starch into sugar and makes it, well, apparently tastes really sweet to deer. I've tried them. I don't think they taste that good.
I don't know. I always bring like an apple and some carrots and stuff just for me to eat because it's, it beats the hell out of eating jerky that you buy in the store. But, it's also because I don't have the option of eating a crop field. But like you said, not necessarily a particularly tasty option for a human being. And so a brassica, just for those of us who aren't conversant in agriculture, is, like you said, it's a basically a root vegetable. It's the type of thing you'd see in a beef stew, right? Yeah,
pretty much. Like I say, it's something, the couple different types that we've used, mixes that we've used, the tops typically grow. We've had them grow. Last year, it didn't grow at all. We screwed up with our planting schedule and planted what turned out to be right before a drought. So none of the food plots came in. But we've had the tops grow as high as 2 feet tall. Wow. That the deer eat, as long as the deer allow them to get that tall. And we've had our sugar beets actually grow to about the size of a softball.
Wow.
So, it's all about getting the soil right. So when you plant a food plot, any article you read or video you watch, they always say to start with a soil test, which we do. Dig up about a cup of soil, dry it out, put it in a bag. We send it to Penn State. Every state has some university that does it. They test it. They let you know how much fertilizer you need to apply, how much lime you need to apply. Sometimes we don't apply as much as they tell us because it's expensive.
Yes.
We amend the soil as best we can. We turn it up with either a rototiller or we just bought a disc cultivator for our side-by-side. We use that. Call to pack, which means just pack it down, throw the seed on, and then pack it down again. That's one of the nicest things about the brassicas. One, they're a nitrogen fixer. So when you apply fertilizer, you don't have to apply any nitrogen fertilizer. They create their own. The other thing that's nice about them is they only need to be planted no more than a 1/4 inch deep. Oh, wow. So we don't have to till up, go crazy deep with tilling up the soil. We actually want to make sure it's barely in the ground, and that's all you need. So we have rocky soil, so that way when we plant this, we don't have to till up the rocks and break our rototiller.
And wow, so a 1/4 inch deep.
That's it. No more. Any more than that, and it will die.
And do you guys have problems planting that shallow with birds or with, chipmunks or anything coming in and eating the crop?
For us, no. When you pack it down after you throw the seed down, I guess sort of out of sight, out of mind for any birds.
Okay.
We have tried planting things like sunflowers in the past,
Mm-hmm.
and we've had a lot of trouble with that. We don't have the space to plant enough of it to offset the doves and the crows coming
Mm-hmm.
in, pulling it out, and eating what's left of the seed after it germinates about an inch. So we've sort of stopped doing that. We do plant some corn, just so that, when I say we plant some corn, we plant about a third of an acre of it.
Okay.
All we're doing is planting some corn so it provides some a visual break from the road where our
Mm-hmm.
property meets the road. And also in the late winter, if the deer decide they want to eat it, then they have, some good carbohydrates
Yep.
to help them get through the winter.
And so that screen that you plant to block the road is so that road hunters don't come on by and see presumably a nice 3.5-year-old deer eating a field and try to figure out how to get at it.
Yeah, I mean, that was our idea at the beginning. We have been extremely lucky where we're at, with not having trespassers on our property.
Mm-hmm.
As for the amount of trail cameras that are on our property, which I'm a trail camera nut, so
Yep.
that's my fault. We have way more than we need, but it works because it's like a security camera for us.
Mm-hmm.
So we haven't noticed a lot of trespassing. So I think it's more just to help the deer feel a little bit safer so that we can extend where we hunt.
Okay.
Because if they didn't feel safe in the field during the day, because of cars driving by, people stopping and looking at them, that would push them back anywhere from 20 to 100 yards into the woods until they
Mm-hmm.
feel comfortable. Now, with extending that 50 yards into our field, that gives us an extra 50 yards in the woods that we can hunt them without them being on edge.
And it presumably makes it a little bit easier for you to access them if they're not 120 yards in the woods, right? I mean,
Yeah. It makes it easier for us. One thing that I noticed last year, we didn't have a lot of corn come up, but the corn that did come up, it actually drew some of the deer from across the road on our neighbor's property onto our property. At first, they just stayed in the field; they wouldn't go past that, and then the rut started,
mm-hmm.
and the bucks then followed the doe onto our property. And realized, hey, there's more food back here. So now this year already, we're starting to see more deer coming further into our property from across the road.
That's great. So it's actually acting as something of a magnet, right? Pulling stuff from other properties in that normally you wouldn't see.
Yeah. And that's one of the greatest things about QDM is if you're practicing just the idea of not shooting younger bucks.
Mm-hmm.
What you're going to have is you're conditioning that buck when it gets pushed off a neighbor's property onto yours and nothing happens to it, then it feels safe there. So now it comes on your property even more. And the more it comes on your property, the less chance that it's going to get shot by a neighbor. And then you have a greater chance of them being able to shoot that buck.
That's like what Mark Kenyon talks about on his podcast when he like doesn't hunt one property at all during rifle season because he wants the deer to be there and be safe so that they can come, late season, late second archery or whatever he has, muzzleloader season, he has a better chance of seeing the deer if they know that one part's safe and the neighbor's property isn't.
Yeah, that's it 100%. That the Penn State and the U.S. Forest Service and the Game Commission have co-opted together to do some tracking of deer with collars. Myself and another guy that Talon Konjak, who helps me with my website, actually got to go and to their trapping sites and see how it works. They didn't trap a deer that day, but we got to talk to them and ask them questions. And one of the things with their GPS collars that they're noticing is that on our rifle season starts on the Monday after Thanksgiving every year.
Okay.
So the Friday after Thanksgiving, they notice that these bucks will travel 200 to 300 to 400 yards away from its normal range and hang out that in a different location for 2 weeks. And why? Because that's our rifle season and that's where they feel safe. So on our property, as soon as we get to our cabin on Friday after Thanksgiving, no one goes in the woods. We don't, everything's already set up. Everything is the way it needs to be. No one actually goes back into where we hunt hoping, we've been doing this for years. Now we
Mm-hmm.
have some actual scientific evidence that hoping that deer come on the property and feel safe, even if it's just those couple days, and that will give us a better shot at
Gotcha.
them.
That's and that's an interesting approach, and that's something that where you own your property, right? And you can limit the access that you have a lot of advantage on. Like I can't control who shows up where and when. I was just clicking through some trail camera pictures from last year, and I have me on the first day of squirrel season when I was out looking for something, and nothing in the woods, and then there's somebody walking by a trail camera who doesn't notice it, and then and this is not the middle of June. This is 10/31. It's in the middle of archery season, and this dude's
Yeah.
just pimping through the woods.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. If you own property, and the more property you own, the more control that you
Yep.
have over a property is definitely going to benefit you in your QDM practices. However, like I said, you can do it yourself, and you can if you feel impassioned by it, which I do,
Mm-hmm.
you can be the advocate to get the people that hunt on that property to do it. Are you going to get 100%? Probably not, unless you run that property. But you can set the example and show them that, and convince them that it will work. And then, expand out on that to neighbors. That's actually my goal for this year, is to get a couple of our neighbors to at least start thinking about it. At least start planting that seed in their head, because I haven't expanded that to that
Mm-hmm.
point yet.
Yep.
So you can do it on your own. It's definitely harder when you have other people. That's sort of a big part of it, is managing other hunters whenever,
Mm-hmm.
and their expectations whenever it comes to QDM.
Mm-hmm. And you said something that I want to talk about a little while. You talked about your passion for QDM and why you think it's important. But you earlier you talked about that there's training and there's some standards that you can take to heart. You went kind of a step beyond kind of just embracing quality deer management, but you actually got an actual certification, right? It's the Deer Steward program. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yes. So I trying to think, that was what was this? That was 3 years ago. I actually took the step to do what QDMA has as their Deer Steward Level 1 class. They offer that both like on site, where you can go somewhere, or they also offer it online. I opted for the online version, just out of convenience, and because it is a little bit cheaper in that route.
Yep.
I did it basically just, I wanted to become a more knowledgeable conservationist. I wanted to know more about white-tailed deer and their habitat and what makes them tick. That's going to help me make the herd healthier with what I decide to do on our property, but also it's going to make me a better hunter as well.
Mm-hmm. And what is that course made up of? What does it look like?
So it's increasing your knowledge, and it has 9 different aspects that they go through. The first, they talk about aging of deer, how to actually age them on the hoof. Because that's their big thing. Not shooting buck with big antlers, but shooting bucks that are of a certain age that you determine is acceptable in your area. They talk about plant identification, so that you can identify invasive species, so that you can identify what type of plants deer like to eat, what they prefer, what they will avoid unless they absolutely have to eat that because there's no other food. They talk about food plots, deer biology, which to me was the most interesting of all of it. And one of the biggest sections that they have, talking about where all the different glands are on their foreheads, on their legs, why, how their biology affects their social behavior, which goes into the next one. They talk about their social patterns, why a buck makes a scrape, why it makes rubs on trees, things like that. They also talk about habitat management techniques. One of the big ones that really harp is managing hunters, poaching, and expectations.
Mm-hmm.
They talk about the predator's impact on deer, and then they talk about data collection. It's something that I'm just starting to get into now with that data collection. I'm not a huge numbers guy,
Mm-hmm.
but in order to properly manage a herd, you're going to have to collect data and actually analyze that data. So they give you some tips on how to do that and in a scientific way that's going to benefit you. The majority of all of these are a combination of articles and videos. There's even some PowerPoints. Now, when I took it, it was great. I loved every second of it.
Mm-hmm.
I printed out a lot of the stuff that they had in there and put it in the binder, and I leaf through it. I'd say at least once or twice a month.
Okay.
They have very recently actually just updated their entire level 1 deer stored course. So it's all new information. It's all updated presentations and just more relevant to today's sort of deer hunting and what we know about deer now. Because if you think about what we knew about deer 3 years ago and what we know about them now, it is night and day with all the different research that's been going on.
And does it cover any of the kind of more, I don't want to say controversial topics, but emergent topics, things like managing disease? I think about CWD or some of the other diseases that are plaguing deer.
Yeah, it did go into, when I took it, it went into it a little bit in the deer biology aspect of it. Now, from what I understand now, that's been a big part of the updated version. They're really harping on the CWD and EHD and ways that you can try to manage that to your best ability at a local level. It's not something that was real big 3 years ago, but now since it's so prevalent that from my understanding, they've really incorporated that now.
Okay. And there are tiers beyond kind of the level 1 steward, right?
Yes. There are actually 3 tiers. That first tier, like I said, online is pretty much it's the easiest, most convenient way to go about that for level 1. Level 2 is in person, it's hands-on, it's a field experience.
Okay.
It is obviously, because it's a field experience, it is more expensive.
Sure.
They do it for everything they offer. They always offer a discount if you're a QDM member.
Okay.
And it costs $30 to become a QDA member. So you're saving more than that with their discount. So you might as well just become a member.
Sure.
As in my opinion, you should anyways. But for the Deer Store 2 course, they basically have 2 or 3 of these field experience courses per year. They rotate where the locations are so that more people can have closer access to them. If I wasn't spending my money to go elk hunting this year, I would be going to it because they have one in Pennsylvania this year that's only about 3.5 hours away. So unfortunately, I'm not able to go.
No, don't say unfortunately. You're going to go have the hunt of a lifetime.
I'm saying unfortunately that I don't have the money to do both.
Okay, fair enough. That's fair. That's fair.
Basically what they're doing in this course, from what I understand in my research, since I haven't done it yet, is that they're basically showing you and having you actually apply the principles you learned in the level 1 course. So, when you're talking about food plots, you're actually going out to the food plot and they're actually showing you how to work this area why they chose that location for a food plot. That's one of the things that we fell victim to the first time we planted a food plot about 6 years ago. Is we just picked an easy, accessible, open area that was already there. Now we're at the point where we're actually making, just because there's trees here doesn't mean this isn't a great spot for a food plot. Gotcha. We're now making food plots where we want them, not where it's just easily done. So that's what the second course is about, is actually showing you how to actually apply those principles at a property level. The level 3 deer stored actually isn't a course at all. The only way that you can actually become a level 3 deer steward is you earn that through your longtime service to QDMA and white-tailed deer.
Okay.
So it's a pretty prestigious award. If you're getting that, you're going to the national convention that they have every year, which for the last couple years, and I just saw today, they're going to have it again in Louisiana. Um, I mean, it's a big deal if you get the deer stored level 3.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to get that someday, but if I don't, if I'm actively working towards it, in my mind, that's all that matters.
Yeah. I think that there's something to be said for it being, I don't want to say bestowed, but, not the result of a class, that I think makes it, I don't want to say, special, right? I mean, not just any schmo can get it. It
Right.
takes some real time and dedication and forethought to get there.
Right. And the thing that I like about it is it's not like you have to have whitetail heaven. You don't have to create a whitetail heaven to get that level 3. You could just be an advocate, a very strong advocate for whitetail deer through politics, through lobbying, through other conservation efforts, through taking other people out deer hunting. If you do that for a long enough time and you can be recognized for doing those things, not just, hey, you have this property and you did this. So you could be someone who never owns property, never does habitat management, but you're an advocate for whitetail deer. You can be recognized for that.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And do you know how many level 3 stewards there are?
I don't. That was one of the things that I'm not sure about. I'm pretty sure they typically award 2 or 3 every year. Okay. But I'm not sure what the exact number is.
Okay. I mean, we can comfortably say it's
a select group.
Yeah, I was going to say less than a few hundred, probably.
Yeah. Oh, Gary, I would say it's probably less than. It might even be less than 100.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, it's there's not a ton of people that get to that level.
Wow. And again, that's a good thing, right? I mean, it's something to strive for and something that you got to really want and need.
Yes. And in my mind, it's like it's the Hall of Fame for QDM, which it should be a very small select group of people for that. It shouldn't be everyone who spends a year practicing it. It should be something that it takes a lot of time and a lot of effort and a lot of advocacy for white-tailed deer before you get to that point.
Yeah, you don't want it to be like the Yankees Hall of Fame with just let anybody in as long as you wear the uniform.
Yeah, I mean, as long as you sat in one of the stadium seats, you're in the Yankee Hall of Fame.
Yeah, so, that's how it works, right?
Right. Yes. Right. Yeah, and that's not the way that it should be.
Yeah, agreed. And one of the other things I just kind of bring this full circle is I think that as much as this helps, the deer and helps the herd and helps all of that, it also helps you. I mean, the things you were talking about that are covered in these courses, the biology, the behavior, all of that helps you hunt the deer too. It's not just
absolutely.
It's not it is altruistic, right? You're doing something for its own sake that's good, but you get something out of this too, in addition to kind of the warm and fuzzies and good feeling and knowing that you're making the world better.
Right, and the reason why I'm an advocate for these classes and doing these things is because, and doing all this work is to show the general public. And anytime I'm talking to someone who is a non-hunter, I don't let them know that I'm a hunter. I let them know that I'm a conservationist. I don't tell them about my hunting exploits. I tell them about the habitat management work I'm doing, because I want them to see I'm not what they picture in their head, that this redneck beer drinking hunter that's out shooting up road signs. That's not the way the majority of hunters are in our country. I want to showcase us in the best light possible and highlight that, I may shoot 1 or 2 deer a year, but I'm feeding 20, 30, 40 deer throughout the year. So while it may take, a couple may sacrifice their lives unwillingly, but the vast majority of them are benefiting from the work I'm doing.
And it's not market hunting. This isn't the 1840s, right?
No.
I mean, where we as hunters pay lots and lots and lots of money into conservation, and without deer stewards and without hunters and without kind of the people who participate in these sports, the recreators, the people who want to go and use the trails for mountain biking, whatever, wouldn't have those trails because it would all be owned by corporations, and the corporations would tell us to get bent.
Right. And I mean, the market hunting, I'm actually personally thankful for market hunting. I mean, it decimated populations, and you can see that the wild buffalo still haven't recovered from it. However, because of those market hunters, the actual real hunters are then banded together and said, no, let's make laws to make this illegal. And if it wasn't for the market hunting, the hunters wouldn't have got together and created the seasons that we have and created the funds for conservation that we have now.
Yep. And it, and the lack of market hunting isn't like an absolute bar. I mean, if you look at, what's the company called? Rugged Meats, right? They've taken a invasive species that's causing a lot of damage in the wild pig, and they've found a way of controlling the population and producing a product from their meat, right, that benefits everybody. So it's avoiding wholesale slaughter of animals that otherwise wouldn't exist or wouldn't have healthy, sustainable populations.
Right. And I would say the key word in that is it's an invasive species.
Yep.
It's not native to North America. And,
you're not taking a punt gun and taking out a whole flock of mallards. You're
right.
You're rounding up 30 or 40 or 50 wild invasive species that nobody really wants.
Right, that are actually doing harm to our native species that we have here. So by taking out as many of the invasive species as we can, we're actually helping our native species, and that's the goal of QDM, is to help a native species, which is the whitetail deer.
Yeah, that's awesome, and it's in my opinion America's finest, most fun to hunt game species out there.
I would agree. I may change my attitude after October, but and an elk hunt, but whitetail hunting will always hold a special place in my heart. That's for sure.
Yeah, it's what got me interested in hunting, right? I mean, it's chasing whitetails that first kind of was like, this sounds fun. When I'm reading about it or seeing it on TV, it's something that I wanted to try, and now my wife's in the room, so I can't say how much money in, but I'm well invested in the pastime, and I am very excited to see what's next.
That's good. One thing that I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up is that I mentioned that the QDMA just revamped their Deer Stored Level 1 course, which is great. Updating is always a good thing. But they also, the thing that is most beneficial to me personally, they also created what they call Deer Stored modules.
Okay.
And basically what these are just one section of the level 1 with updated information for a cheaper rate. So I actually just finished one on food plots. So it basically just consolidates all the information that they put out on a daily basis about a category, and you get access to it. And while there's no necessary certification, it's more of just like hey, here's an update to what you already learned. Or you're thinking about level 1, but not sure if you want to spend the money. Here's a little idea of what you might be learning about if you take that course.
I'm going to have to look into that.
Yeah, and actually one of the modules they have is called QDM and the QDMA. And it basically goes over all the information of what makes up the QDM philosophy, what makes up the QDMA, what they feel is important, and really gives a very in-depth look into the benefits of QDM.
Wow. I'm going to have to definitely do that because, while I don't own my own property, and I'm still kind of, in all honesty, in that let's just get the monkey off your back, get a deer stage. In the near future, I'd like to be at the point where I can, practice it and try to become something of an evangelist and kind of spread the message and promote it as well as you do.
Right. Well, and that's one of the reasons why I like QDM is that, like I said, they're not saying you have to shoot a 6-year-old buck or a buck that's this big. It's very scaled in what you feel you need to help manage the herd, but also still want to feel successful. If I go out for 10 years and never shoot a deer because it's never old enough, I'm not going to enjoy my time outdoors as much. So they actively say that new hunters or young hunters, allow them to shoot younger deer because that will instill the passion for deer hunting, which will hopefully lead to practicing QDM in the future.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really interesting. And, I definitely, I see that and the importance of hunter recruitment because, you see everywhere. You read Field and Stream, you listen to podcasts, and people are very, and I think justifiably, concerned about recruiting the next generation of hunters. Guys you're in my age are in it. We're approaching kind of prime hunting ages, right, where we're older, we have a little bit of flexible cash, but we don't have, we're not retired, we can still get out, and we're gonna have, I have a kid, you're gonna have children in the future. Recruiting those people and recruiting people, my younger brothers are 3 and 6 years younger than me. Recruiting people of that next immediate generation and having them participate in the sport is definitely something that's important. And I can absolutely see with the ADD that some folks have, going out in the woods for 10 years, like you said, and never shooting anything, I think is troubling and is going to cause some serious problems.
Yeah, and I mean, I will, when I have children, I will give them ample opportunity to go hunting and to hopefully fall in love with it the way I have. However, I'm not going to push it on them.
Correct.
Personally, I feel like if we really want to sustain and even grow our hunting community, it's not just getting the next generation of our family into hunting. It's about getting people who are on the fringe, who don't hunt. We need to get those people in, which is something I'm excited about because we have this sort of locavore movement. People are wanting to eat local. People are wanting to not eat factory farmed foods. And what better way to enhance your diet than actually eat meat that you harvested, that was wild for its entire life. So if we can get more of those quote unquote hipsters to join us in the woods, even though sometimes I don't get along with their trends, I would gladly take one along if anyone decided that they wanted to come with me to hunt.
Absolutely. And I'll tell you this much. I was drinking PBR before they thought it was ironically cool.
I was too. I couldn't believe it whenever I walked into a bar first time and saw 10 other guys with man buns drinking PBR. It made me change my beer of choice.
What did you switch to?
I switched to Guinness.
Good choice.
Yeah.
That was
so.
Yeah, that was the first beer I ever drank illegally underage in a bar.
Oh wow!
Okay. Allegedly,
right.
So cool. Yeah, good.
That will definitely keep the lights from turning out too fast. That's for sure.
Yep, absolutely. Before we wind down, we've been talking for about an hour and almost an hour and 20 minutes. I want to be respectful to your time. Anything you want to add before we ring off here tonight?
The only thing is for me is that QDM and QDMA, to become a member, it's $30. That $30 goes to a subscription that I believe comes every, I think it's 6 quality whitetail magazines a year, which have
one every other month.
Yeah, they have wonderful information in them. Great photography, as I'm looking at a couple that are on my desk here. Some beautiful pictures of bucks. It's only $30. The majority of that goes towards actual conservation funding and advocacy for whitetail deer. Even if you can't practice QDM right now this year, even for another 5 years, that's a great way to support game that we are hunting. So I would, and to this point now, it's even starting to fund some CWD research, which is a major issue facing whitetail deer. So I would just very much, tell everyone and encourage everyone to become a member of the QDMA. Even if you can't practice it, $30 will go along. Everyone's $30 will go a long way to that. To the point where my wife doesn't know it, but she's also a QDMA member. So
that works. I'm literally going to the website right now to join. So there's one more paying dues, and I'll make sure to put a link to how to join the QDMA in the description of this episode.
That would be great.
So Jason, thank you so much for coming back on and talking about deer management and all the things that go along with it.
Oh, I appreciate it. Thank you for having me on.
Hey everyone, it's Andrew from Neophyte in the Woods. Just popping in real quick, wanting to do a quick kind of bumper out here. We here at Neophyte in the Woods and the Change Your POV Network do this all out of the goodness of our hearts. We legitimately love and are passionate about the subjects about which we speak. However, that doesn't mean that we're not absorbing some costs. And one of the ways we're trying to address the overhead costs associated with putting out these podcasts is to do Patreon. And you can find a link to it right down at the bottom in the kind of the episode show notes on our website. If you could donate anything that you're able to support us and help us get this content coming out to you, it would be very much appreciated. There are tiers of membership from $1 all the way up to 10, and you can donate more than that. For our backers, our Patreon patrons, we do offer some unique content. We've been doing weekly shows where we do a live stream and we talk about a quote on Mondays. It's normally right around 8 p.m. Eastern. There's also some other cool rewards, including the level at which I back at $10 a month. You can actually get, believe it or not, a signed autographed picture of our fearless leaders, Bennett and Eddie. It really changed my life. It sits actually right up above the computer where I record all this stuff. I take it with me when I go hunting. I take it with me when I go fishing. I take it with me when I go to work. It goes everywhere with me. Some people have an EDC pocket knife. I have an EDC picture of Ben and Eddie. I would really strongly suggest you back us and keep the good work that we're doing coming. Thanks for listening. Thanks for supporting us on Patreon. Thanks for leaving us reviews on iTunes. And we'll talk to you next week.